Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Techstrong Unplugged. I'm your host, Tan Solomon, and this is episode 23 of our series. In this episode, we're taking you to VueConf 2024. At VueConf, our co-host Cassandra Chin met up with Evan Yu, and they discussed the challenges of balancing coding with community management. Evan is the independent open source developer behind Vue.js and Vite, and he breaks down the ins and outs of leading open source development. Without further ado, let's head over to VueConf 2024.
Welcome back to Techstrong Unplugged. My name is Cassandra Chin, and today we have Evan Yu with us today.
Hello.
Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. I am an independent open source developer based in Singapore right now. I've been working independently in open source for 8 years now, since 2016, and I mostly work on two projects, Vue.js and Vite. Vue is a front-end JavaScript framework, and Vite is a JavaScript build tool. So essentially, Vite is the lower-level tool that supports frameworks like Vue, but it also supports other kind of frameworks. Yeah.
I like a better introduction to yourself would be, we're at the VueConf today, and you're like the star of the show.
Well, we're at VueConf, and there are a lot of people here to talk about the things I built, so that's pretty cool.
So, do you want to talk a little bit about, like, Vue or, like, how you work on it every day?
Sure. I guess my daily routine nowadays is pretty... It's kind of... I try hard to find quality time to actually just write code, but it's getting... Over time, it's gotten more and more difficult. Like, I think in the early days, when I just started working on Vue, I was mostly just writing code all day, and I don't have to talk to people because mostly it was just me. But over time, we started having a team. We have contributors. We have a community. We started having more sub-projects in the scope of the framework. So I started having to, find people to work on things, help people to align on how things should work together, and sometimes finding ways to help other developers get sponsorships, making the whole project sustainable. And since I also started Vite also grew into its own ecosystem. So I kind of have to do similar things in the Vite ecosystem as well. So now I would say I spend more than half of the time coordinating things, trying to get people working together, trying to get the ecosystem to grow in a way. But I still try to spend, the other half just mostly working on Vue core. Nowadays, it's I try to do things in cycles. So basically, I'm gonna say this week I'm just gonna focus on fixing issues. Next week I'm gonna focus on a specific feature. So that it's easier to focus because there are just too many things kind of pulling me in different directions. Yeah.
So there's a lot more going on now that the project's bigger.
Yeah, definitely.
How did you actually get started early in your tech career?
Right. So I graduated from a master's program that's called Master of Fine Arts in Design and Technology. It's a hybrid program at Parsons in New York, and it got me exposed to both design and technology. And I was lucky to land a job at Google after graduation at a department called Creative Labs. So it was not really a kind of a proper engineering position. It's more like a creative technologist. We're building a lot of these interactive prototypes, UI experiments, things like you'd see in the past, like Chrome experiments or like doing 3D in the browser, that type of work. That was super interesting. But later on, I started, messing around with my own little framework in my spare time. And that got me more and more interested in, how to build real applications for the web. And eventually, the little framework somehow got popular, and I was like, oh, this is really a thing now. So I dedicated more and more time into it. Eventually, it became my full-time job. Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what Vue actually is?
Sure. I guess for people who do not work in front end, The general idea is you want to build UI on the web. And when building UI, there are some principles that are shared. For example, you don't really want to manipulate the UI in a very imperative fashion because UI is something that's long-running and changes over time. It can get really complex. The state can get really complex. So if you manually manage all the changes over time, your code quickly becomes very error-prone. So imperative programming in general leads to this kind of situations, right? So usually we want something that's more declarative. You want to be able to describe the state and describe what you want to see on the screen and let some framework to bind it for you so that when later on you can focus on the business logic side of things. You just focus on how the state changes and no longer need to worry about how the actual UI updates, right? So that's the purpose of a framework. And Vue is among one of the more popular ones. And essentially, it gives you this component mental model so that you can write your UI by declaring some reactive state, declaring a template. You write a template declaring how you want the state and the end result are connected, right? So once you write that, Vue will take care of the rest and make things interactive. And then you can write these things in little self-contained units called components. And then you can compose all these components together in a tree into a big application. Yeah.
How easy is it to just spin up a website using Vue?
The easiest way really is you open your browser. So the easiest way is you can use Vue over a script tag. So Vue can be loaded from a CDN, which means you don't even need to install it per se. So the easiest way is like open up an HTML file, add a script tag, point to Vue on the CDN, and open the page. You have Vue running on your page. This is probably one of the lowest barrier of entry among all the frameworks that we see nowadays. But Vue is designed to be incrementally adoptable, right? So you can get started this way. It's the easiest. But it's also, it is limiting because you can only work on the current page, and it doesn't give you all these, advanced optimizations you would get, which you will probably need if you're building a more serious production-oriented application. So Vue essentially gives you this pathway from starting from something really, really simple. Then you can learn a bit more, learn about like front-end tools like Vite, or usually nowadays, when you build a serious front-end application, you will need Node.js. You will need to set up some build tools, and Vue also takes care of that for you. So you can use our CLI to scaffold a project, which has all the bells and whistles installed. And then you can spin up a local dev server, and you will have the ability to write what we call single-file components, which is a pretty nice way to encapsulate these small units of for your use and composition. And we also give you features like hot module replacement. Sounds fancy, but it really means when you edit and save your code, you see the changes reflect instantly instead of having to wait for the page to slowly reload.
And it's nice you get instant feedback.
Yeah, that's a very big focus of modern front-end toolchains. And in fact, I created Vite mostly because the PrevGen tools, the PrevGen tools first introduced the concept of instant feedback via this hot reload concept, but the implementation kind of breaks down when you have larger applications. Basically, the feedback speed becomes slower and slower as your application grows. So sometimes it can take like 5 seconds after you save to see anything change on the screen. And that really kind of hurts this like iterative feedback loop. When you're in the zone, you want to just get instant feedback. So Vite was essentially created to address this very problem because we use a somehow different model to apply these hot changes. So we made the hot update essentially constant and made it decoupled from the project size. So no matter how many files or components you have in your project, we will apply the hot update almost always at the same speed. So that makes the dev experience much better overall.
Do you ever feel surprised by the things people build using Vue?
Oh yeah, definitely. So we have a little DevTools extension that you can install in Chrome. And when I visit a website that uses Vue, the extension will light up a little Vue icon in the toolbar. So that's when I know I'm looking at a website that's using Vue. And sometimes I'll get surprised, like visiting a well-known brand that I'm trying to buy stuff from, and I see the icon light up. I'm like, whoa, they're using Vue. So there are a lot of like pleasant surprises like this.
I think it's really cool you get to see that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else which is interesting to you?
Sorry?
Is there anything else which is interesting to you? Like,
I guess nowadays, I think my main focus right now is kind of mostly split between Vue and Vite. There's just so many things going on. I do wish I have more time to play around with AI stuff, but at the same time, I just have my plates really full, and I don't, it's interesting because I do see people trying really hard to somehow link front end with AI, but for me, I guess before I find something that can really meaningfully improve the developer experience of Vue and Vite users, currently I don't really see that connection yet. But hopefully in the future we'll have opportunities to leverage some of the AI stuff in the toolchain.
Do you ever use AI tools to help you code?
I did. So I tried Copilot, but I don't really find it super helpful to me. That's a personal thing because I mostly work in framework and tooling layers. So these situations are relatively low level, and there are just less code on the internet that are doing similar things. So in general, AI is really good at doing things that other people have been doing a lot on the internet, right? So framework level code, not so much. And because every framework is somewhat different, right? So every time I try to use Copilot in my daily work, it's kind of like, it's kind of underwhelming. But mostly it's because the kind of work that I do. Usually it's more helpful if I'm dealing with a very specific small problem, like, say, I'm working on a small function that does a very specific thing, like write me a good regular expression or help me write a function that do some string manipulation. I think in those cases, Copilot is actually doing a pretty good job. But at the high level, it just lacks this holistic understanding of a framework as a whole. So I think it's this lack of global context that's the main challenge. Yeah.
It doesn't have that much context.
Sorry?
AI doesn't have that much context about what we're doing.
Yeah, it's really limited to the token context length, and also like when you are dealing with a relatively large code base, like the understanding, it's also very different from like pure text. Say when you're reading a book, a long book can still be kind of easily divided into sections or chapters. So you can build an index on top of that to aid the AI. So you can basically narrow the context and sort of do some pre-processing to provide, you basically manually condense the context for the AI first, for the AI to do the work. But I don't think that work on code bases because code bases are not like written text. It's like the underlying relationships between these modules. It's really hard for you to like condense that. Therefore, it makes it hard for AI to process that. So, but obviously, I believe there are really, really smart people working on these problems. So I still look forward to what we can see in a few years.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
Do you ever like collaborate or work with people while you work on Vue?
Oh yeah, definitely. We have a lot of contributors over time. So over time, the Vue framework as a whole has expanded beyond just Vue core because we have these additional components of the framework. Like we have Vue core, we have Vue router, we have Pino, which is a state management library. We have our documentation side. We have a static side generator called VitePress, and then we have the DevTools extension that I mentioned, and then there's the IDE support, which is called Vue Language Tools. A lot of these kind of grew into very, very specific domains, and we delegate them to team members who've been working on those things for a very long time, and they have the expertise to keep maintaining and evolving them. So I'm mostly focused on Vue core and then trying to coordinate everything to make sure everything stays consistent and coherent.
Is it difficult to work on Vue core and like not mess up the other projects on top of it?
It is. That's why one of the most common things after we do a release is we get regression reports on people filing issues, say, this latest change just broke this downstream library, right? So I think it's kind of inevitable because Vue is so widely used. We probably have like millions of projects running in the wild. So to ensure stability, we actually had to introduce a system called Ecosystem CI. This Ecosystem CI was first created for Vite because Vite also has a lot of downstream dependencies. And we adapted the system back to Vue as well. So the idea is we will have a system where we pull in the latest code from the important ecosystem libraries. So very widely used projects that depend on Vue. We'll pull in their tests. Then we will build a version of Vue based on the current latest commit on our main branch. We publish locally to a mock registry. And then we essentially run these downstream projects tests as if we have already published that version of Vue. So it's basically we do all this so that we can test it as real as possible without actually publishing it, right?
There's a lot of work that goes into testing and making sure nothing breaks.
Absolutely. So every time before we do a release, we'll likely see Ecosystem CI with a few test failures. Then we'll have to dig into those, make sure those are not, sometimes there are false positives, sometimes it's a real issue. So we have to look into every single one of them, make sure nothing actually breaks. And if there are some inevitable breakage, we'll have to reach out to the downstream project maintainers to work with them to figure out what's the best path forward. So the release cycle kind of got a lot longer compared to early days where I just push changes and publish. Nowadays, every release kind of takes a lot more work, but at the same time, it's...
How long does it take between releases?
We don't have a fixed release schedule. Usually it's released on demand. So patch releases usually get released every 1 or 2 weeks. And depending on whether there are important regressions that we need to, release fixes quickly, minor releases usually can take anywhere between 3 to 6 months. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think you've brought a lot of unique perspectives.
Yeah. When your project gets big and a lot of people use it, there becomes a lot more overhead. Like, for example, when we try to introduce new big major features, we will have to go through an RFC process. So essentially, we sketch out the motivation, the proposed changes, what problem does it address, what's the detailed API design, what are the migration paths, what are the potential impact on learning curve and everything. So we write that all out and get the community involved, get their feedback. Sometimes people don't like it. Sometimes people will be like, I like this, but I think this should change, right? So usually it'll take anywhere between, fast features, relatively, if it's not controversial, we can land it in a month or two. But some features are really, really controversial, and it can take, half a year or to a year, and some of them actually end up getting dropped because we just cannot reach consensus among the community. Yeah.
I see. It's interesting how features go through that.
Yeah.
I think we've had a really good chat today. So thank you, Evan.
Yeah, thank you.